Robertson, president of the African American Film Critics Association. Today we are talking to the funny Guy Torry about Fat Tuesdays. We're going to kick things off by introducing you to the AFCA members who are on the call today, starting with Katia Woods, our facilitator in Philadelphia, Carolyn Hines in Chicago, Mercedes Springer in Atlanta, Reggie Pounder in Chicago, Brandon Collins in New York, DJ Chris Stiles in Cleveland, Dana Abercrombie in New York, New York. Harrison, what market are you in?
Sorry, I was muted. Winston-Salem right now.
Okay, and Niger in Washington, D.C., if I'm not mistaken, right?
Chocolate City.
That's right. I'm gonna let you guys do what you do so well, and I will see you on the other side.
Thank you. Thank you for the introductions.
Hi, Guy. Brandon Collins, the Media and Popcorn Podcast. Now, I'm a New York stand-up comedian and producer. I produced an acclaimed show for 7 years. That's on a monthly cadence, right? So I know how hard that was. What was it like for you doing Fat Tuesdays on a weekly basis and maintaining the high quality for the culture and the industry? Because you wouldn't have gotten to where you are with the show if you didn't do that. So could you speak a little bit about your process of booking and producing the show?
Well, you know, I said in the documentary, but I say it all the time, it was definitely an assignment, a divine assignment, because I was really young at the time. I hadn't done comedy but 3 years. I'd never ran a business before. I just had this, you know, this seed planted to want to showcase other comedians. And, you know, it was just like, you know, you get in where you fit in. And sometimes being naive is smart. But doing it was, as I went along, you just learn stuff. You know, being a touring comedian, I've toured comedy clubs all over the country. So what I would do is to steal certain things from them, things that they did that I liked, I'd bring it to Fat Tuesdays and add that to how I ran the room.
Great job. And also the homies in the New York comedy scene said to thank you for all the work you've done, man.
And I was just in this weekend hanging out at the Cellar, and the response from the local comedians, New York comedians, because you know you all are honest, was like they really enjoyed the doc, and that meant a lot to me because the young ones are saying they were inspired about it, and they stuff they didn't know that they're glad we put in. And just, you know, New Yorkers are honest, and I'm glad that they gave me the honest feedback. Bumped into Chris Rock last night, and he was, you know, who was supposed to be in it, but his press schedule interfered. But he was very congratulatory as well. So it was always fun coming to New York and hanging out on the comedy scene because you guys are the best.
Thank you, man.
Hi, guys. This is Reggie Pounder out of Chicago. And I know
Chi-town.
For sure. I know you got jokes, but when we start talking about money is not, there's nothing funny about money. You don't want to be funny about your money. So talk about you guys made money for these folks. And so, So when you said you went through it, you know, learned as you went along, did you start off with a little bit of money, got a little bit more money? How did the money situation work out for you? And did you get smarter about money as you did this whole thing?
I did not. Everything was out of my pocket, basically. And what came through the door. I didn't know business back then. I just knew I wanted to showcase comedians. It wasn't about making money for me because I was already a working actor. I was already on tour, the Def Comedy Jam tour that toured that year. So I was always hustling. So I just wanted to make enough money on that night to pay the comedians and pay my staff. I had a small staff of 3. I had a room manager. I had Big Shorty doing security. And this is when I was in the belly room, of course. And I had the stripper Cherry Popper, who was pressing play on a cassette machine. And that was my only really 3 employees. And the comedians, just kind of a potluck then. I didn't start really paying the comedians until I moved downstairs to the big room. But the whole goal was just whatever money I made was to put back into that night, whatever we needed. And so, yeah, I never really got smart about the money tip back then. It was really more about showcasing comedians and getting people seen.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Nigeria Chambers of Big O Boat Media out of Washington, D.C. I got to say, and I think I can speak for everybody here, that this docuseries was nothing but a celebration of Black excellence. And it was a little difficult to prepare for this because I just consumed so much wisdom, so much knowledge, so much appreciation that's like one of those type of things where you just sit back and listen. You know, you don't have anything to say. You know, when you go back and see your elders, you go to those family gatherings, you just sit there and you're like, I didn't know that. I didn't realize that. So after I took a long time to figure out what I really wanted to ask, I sat back and I said, you know what? I wonder, was there anything amongst all of this, the testimonies, very raw testimonies and real, did you learn or discover after either connecting the dots or getting some of these testimonies out there that you were truly surprised about once you completed the docuseries?
Absolutely. I learned a lot when I was putting the sizzle together, the presentation to go out and shop. And that's what made me really want to tell this story, because it was 13 years ago, Michael Blackson and I were on a flight going to a city for different shows. He said he had missed Fat Tuesdays, and these young comics need to know about Fat Tuesdays. And that's when a light bulb went off in my head. Like, you know what? Okay, interesting. So then I started looking through my archives. I'm a hoarder like my mom. And I started looking through old videos and stuff I had. And then I started asking people. There's a friend of mine who was an up-and-coming director, Bishop Moore. And I said, man, I want to shoot this sizzle for this documentary on Fat Tuesdays. Can you shoot for me? And he did. And when I started hearing these stories come out of these comedians, I was like, I never knew Fat Tuesdays meant that much to them. But also not just the comedians, but it was athletes. You know, it was singers and actors and directors. When I sat down with them and started talking to them, they were like, man, Fat Tuesday changed my life. I got casted for this movie or that TV show. I got my agent from there. And I was like, okay, interesting. And then one day I was like, man, it's crazy, because Fat Tuesdays came out of the 92 riots. And basically, when industry quit going to the hood to see us, I took the hood to Hollywood, and I was like, damn, had it not been for Rodney King, it may not have been a Nick Cannon or a Cat Williams or a Guy Torrey. So I contacted Rodney Rodney King. He was doing a book signing in Leimert Park, and I went and asked him. I told him about the project, and he was going to do it. And then 2 weeks later, he died. So, but it was ironic that, man, that is probably what really tipped off, you know, me going to Sunset Boulevard, because they weren't coming to us. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot from my staff. I didn't know there was like sex going on in the bathroom. I didn't know my hostesses were that loose, because I went to church with all of them. we all went to Faithful Central Church, and I didn't know they were getting down like that, because I was so focused on hosting and producing the room and the back of the house. You know, I didn't know what was going on in the bathrooms in the front of the house. So I learned a lot, and I did learn how personal Fat Tuesdays was to a lot of people, not just comedians.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
It was banging. I didn't know there was banging. I know there was banging, like, you know, face banging, but I know it was banging, like banging.
Hi, guys. Mercedes here with She Critiques in Atlanta. Like you said, we got a history lesson. I got chuckles. It took me through all those emotions.
Chuckles.
I'm sorry. I laugh. But it took us through all those emotions, and quite frankly, like, you were very vulnerable in the relationship that you shared with your brother. So there was this vulnerability aspect in it as well. Can you talk about why that was important for you as the executive producer to put this as a part of the film, of the docuseries?
First of all, I got a call from Snoop Dogg yesterday. I don't know where he got my number, but it's not, you know, I'm me. I'm not, you know, it ain't hard to get my number in any woman's bathroom, and it's on the wall. But I got a call from Snoop yesterday cussing me out, saying, man, you had, you know, I don't know what the line is on this, but he was saying, yeah, man, you had an N-word crying, man. You know, you self-sensitive ass had me crying, man, with you and your brother's story. Then he said, you said you were going to do it again. You had me crying again. So it was just funny and crazy to hear Snoop, like, he was touched by it. But it's very real. It's part of, you know, my journey, my relationship with my brother, because my brother is the one who really was my mentor. I had, you know, he was on the pedestal for me to be, you know, for me to be like, and to have the relationship, you know, not be what it was in the beginning is tough. It hurts. And, you know, I keep it, you know, I try to keep the peace, because, you know, my dad is gone on, and, you know, my mom is still here, so I don't want her feeling any type of way. But yeah, it's a tough relationship. And, you know, a lot of people have come to me since and said that they have a similar relationship with their brother or their sister. And it's crazy. So they were appreciative that I was able to show that. And I didn't expect to cry. It was just it was what it was. And I'm never shy about it. I'm transparent about it. Families fight. Love them. Don't really like them, but love them. Like if we weren't family, we wouldn't hang out. We just don't gel like that. But he's still one of my heroes. He's still one of my still big bro, and he's gonna always be that. But we don't have to get along, for him to be my hero. But yeah, and Reggie. I mean, Reggie Hudlin is a great director, producer, and he saw fit to put it in there because I think he and his brother may be going through some of the same things. Warrington Hudlin, who another great director. So I think he felt, that relationship he knew that was real. And I'm sure he experienced it with him, and so many other people out there experienced the same thing. So I didn't mind keeping it in there. And when you hire a director to direct, you let them direct. I've done my part by compiling all the stories and backgrounds and everything and relationships. And when you hire a director, you let them direct. You don't be Jerry Jones and Al Davis and you hire a coach and you coach the damn team from the owner's box. No, you let directors direct, and showrunners showrun. And you sit back, and if they ask you a question, then and Reggie was great at that. Whenever they would get done with the interviews, he would say, "Guys, is there anything else?" And I would say, "Yes, let's talk about that." But I was very respectful to sit back and let Byron Phillips and Reggie Hudlin direct this.
Thank you for the transparency.
You're welcome.
Guy Katya Woods, Cup of Soul show. One of the things that was really astonishing about this is that not only obviously the comedy, but the other part is that you show that you don't have to be necessarily white in order to make revenue. And at one point you were literally, your situation was keeping the club afloat. Can you talk a little bit about, do you feel as though that we don't talk enough about how Black business or Black comedians are a vital part of the comedy club business circuit? Because I think that's really important that we speak about how the business part of it benefited in the long run, the club owners.
That's a great question. Black people have always been the money makers for businesses. We did 400 years of free labor and we built this country, then got kicked to the ghetto. When the NBA was suffering, it was the black athletes, the Magic Johnsons and then later the Michael Jordans that kept the league afloat. Even with baseball, when baseball was going down, Mark McGwire was white, but Sammy Sosa, who's not Black, but he's of African descent, they brought the league back with their home run derby. So Blacks have always had their hand in making businesses flourish. You look at the networks. When the UPN, when Fox first started, they had all those Black shows. Got the NFL contract, and Black shows started to disappear. UPN, WB started with Black shows. And if you look at the music industry, hip hop, soul, R&B, same thing. We're always at the top of the charts. Comedy clubs, mainstream comedy clubs now, with the birth of Def Jam and later on Fat Tuesdays, when they open a comedy club, if you look at the lineup for the first couple of months, it's always Black comedians, because that's how they know they're gonna get the word out. That's how they train their staff, and they know Black people will come out and support, especially during holidays. But what they don't realize is the reason why we do that, because we need to laugh the most. We went through the most. So of course we're gonna come out and laugh, because this crap we have to go through in this country every day, we need that break. We need that comedian who sees things the way you see it, and we can be able to tell it in a funny way and make us laugh at it. Fat Tuesdays helped the healing of Los Angeles because of that. After the Rodney King verdict, LA was divided. The country was divided at that time. You had the Michael Jackson trial in the 90s. That divided America. You had the OJ trial, and you had the Rodney King. So the tension in LA was thick, as well in other cities. So being able to laugh at ourselves and laugh with ourselves and come to this comedy night that was like Cotton Club meets, you know, a comedy club. It was like a cookout, a family reunion at Fat Tuesdays. You know, people caught up with other friends that hadn't seen in a while, but we were able to laugh at ourselves and laugh with ourselves together. So we've always been, you know, a really good moneymaker for these comedy clubs. Even with alcohol, like I used to, whenever I would drink a certain alcohol, when I mentioned it on stage, the club manager say, "Man, every time you mention that, the sales for that particular drink goes up." We're the biggest, you know, spenders in this country. So I'm not surprised, but we need to talk about it more. It should be talked about more, and we need to know our value and our worth, and start, you know, start that conversation.
Hi, Guy. Carolyn Fraser, I have an Carolyn Talks podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today and for doing this documentary, because I think it's very important, especially for the younger generations or for people who aren't familiar with the North American Black comedy scene. Something that really struck me with the series is how it shows the evolution of Black comedy throughout the last 30 years. And you talked, and it touched a bit upon how social media has become such a big influence in comedy. So can you just talk about that from your perspective? Because social media has allowed people like Ryan Cannon to become a writer now on Last Week Tonight, and for other women like Leslie Jones to share her comedy through Twitter, like tweets for events and stuff. So talk about your perspective on the evolution of comedy from television to social media.
Well, good question. You know, it's I had to lay the groundwork. I mean, this documentary really started even deeper than that. When I was doing my research just on Black comedy and Black people, period, I took it all the way back to slavery. Slaves used to tell jokes to master to keep from getting their ass whooped. And then if they were funny enough, the slave master would take them to another plantation to perform for another slave owner. So Negro's been on tour for a long time. And we've been, you know, I would have loved to be in them cotton fields back then, you know, with them playing the dozens, you know. Can you imagine, you know, Kunta Kinte coming back with a half a foot and all the jokes he got? I mean, that's what we do. I was just at the Comedy Cellar this weekend, and the comedians was going in on comedian Godfrey for his TI run in, and they were letting Godfrey have it. But that's what we do. We it's our love, but we gonna let you have it. So I know those slaves back then was going deep into the burlap bags with jokes back then. So I had to. We ended up focusing it on a little bit, not as broad, but we had to take it to that, and then the Chitlin Circuit and how the Chitlin Circuit came about and all that, and then we kind of just settled on, okay, let's talk about the Comedy Act Theater, and because we got to explain why Fat Tuesdays was so important. It was important because the places we had to perform, and what people don't realize, when I first got to LA, and white people would ask me, "You're a comedian?" I'm like, yeah. When can I see at the Comedy Store, the Laugh Factory, Improv? And I couldn't tell them because I wasn't a regular. I didn't have a TV show. I wasn't in movies. And if you're Black back then, you weren't really seeing those stages as much. And I hated how they made me feel. They made me feel like I wasn't a real comic because I wasn't in one of the big clubs on Sunset. And I hated that feeling. I hated Black comedians who were regulars at those big three comedy clubs on Sunset, coming down to the hood, peacocking, walking around like, yeah, I got a spot at the Comedy Store tonight or the Improv. And I hated that. So I wanted to create a place where a comedian can tell someone, an agent or a manager, hey, come see me at the Comedy Store on Sunset. And I wanted a place where they felt at home, where they don't have to do white jokes. They can do jokes for us because the room is 99% Black. And you don't have to alter your humor. You can be comfortable in your skin and your Black skin telling those jokes. So it was very important to show that, but also the future. With this documentary, I always wanted to, you know, preserve the past, honor the present, and inspire the future. You know, in my generation of comedians some of them are always going in on these new comedians, you know, as Bob Sumner calls them, social medians, because they have a different way in. That's just their way in. Don't hate on them. If you're smart, you know, they can teach us how to be the social media comedian, and we can teach them game. We can teach them, you know, the live show. And I applaud what these younger comedians have, and the sketches and skits they do are amazing. And I wish I was that talented to do that or that focused to do that. But in my word to them is just always put the reps in, get on stage. You have the best of both worlds, because I've seen some of those shows where people pay money to come see the social medians, and they're supposed to do 45 to 50 minutes and they only have like 5. And what that does is it kind of hurts live comedy. If you're coming to a comedy show for the first time in your life, and that's your first experience, and you're expecting somebody to go 45 minutes and after 5-6 minutes, they're done, that hurts live stand-up. And we may lose a live customer for life. So I wanted to be able to, for these new comedians to see, you know, the history of not just Black comedy, but comedy period, and what it takes and how hard it was for me to get on stage at a white establishment, but even harder for the generations before me, and to respect that stage when you get on stage. And that's what, you know, when I moved to the main room at the Comedy Store, it was so important for me not to fail, because I knew we don't get those opportunities much. So whatever money I got, I put back into making that room. To finish answering another question that was asked earlier, I put that money back into the room to make sure I had a great staff. We would have a prayer before every, before we open those doors. We'd have a prayer, and then we'd hash out stuff. Okay, anybody got gripes, anybody got problems, da da da. Then we all pray together as a family. And I wanted a family atmosphere because I told my staff, the bouncers, I told them, look, when they come to this comedy club, when they come to Fat Tuesdays, don't treat them how you all treat the customers at other clubs, at dance clubs in LA, that make you feel like it's a privilege for you to be up in here. I said, we're gonna reverse that, and we're gonna say it's a privilege to have you here, and change that, because out the gate, they're the first persons they see. They're the front line. So if you piss them off before they even get in the door to the cash register, then that makes my job hard as a comedian, or the other comedian's job harder, because it messes up the energy. And I wanted, I mean, that was in there, but I think that ended up getting cut. I've seen so many versions of this documentary. So it's important for these new comedians to know where we came from, and why you're able to do what you're doing, because people like myself and people like Eddie Murphy and Dick Gregory and pre-Pill Bill Cosby paved the way for me, as we paved the way for others.
Great, thank
I know
you
it was
so
kind of
much.
long-winded, I'm sorry, but
No, you answered it perfectly, because if I had another question, you answered it already about the audience reaction. So thank you.
Dana Abercrombie from the Coalition. What I loved is the opening montage with Steve Harvey, and he kind of talked about how he was able to be free during Fat Tuesdays in his performance, how he was able to say everything on his mind without censorship. Now we have, things have evolved now where you have to kind of self-censor what you really feel and what you want to say. Do you feel that now today comedians have to evolve with the growing times, with the camera always in your face? Or should comedians still be able to say what they have to say without the fear of ridicule?
I think what was happening, I don't believe in this cancel culture bull crap. It's so stupid to me, because the intent of majority of comedians are not to be mean. We're dark, twisted individuals. We're messed up on the inside. That's why we do comedy, and you like how we have our twist on the world. You like how we have a twist on a certain situation. That's why you come to comedy clubs to see, okay, your favorite comedians, what's their take on Ukraine, Russia situation? What's their take on Jesse Smollett? What's their take on whatever that's going on Barack Obama or Trump, whatever. And you love their stuff for years. And then there's one bit that you don't agree with, that you may not agree with. So now you want to cancel everything? Everything because of one bit you got a little butthole hurt about? Come on, that's not fair. And I think what we have to do is you have to adapt. Especially the Black people, especially when you're in the spotlight. If you have the celebrity status, you got to move different. Just be smarter. And I say a lot of controversial things. And before I say it, I have some friends who are smarter than me that will run it by them first and say, hey, am I saying this the right way? Is it gonna come out right? Because I'm gonna still be bold about it, but we may have to be a little smarter. You're not gonna stop me from saying it, but let me say it in a way to where my ass is covered, or people get what I'm saying. They're not taking it personal, or they agree with my point of view. You can't tell me about my point of view. My point of view is my point of view. How I see the world is how I see the world. You're not gonna tell me that. I'm the God of my set on stage. I created that set, so I'm God in that set. So you're not gonna tell God how to do his job. Don't tell me how to do my job when I'm on set, when I'm on stage doing my set. So, let's take Whoopi Goldberg, who was in a situation. It's one of my favorite comedians, and I'm willing to guarantee that she didn't mean any mean intent behind it. And I think she didn't stick the landing correctly, because sometimes I have, crazy thoughts. I throw a bold statement out there, and if I don't stick the landing right, it's gonna come out pretty messed up. And I just think in the moment, she didn't stick the landing. And I don't think her intent was to be mean or to be racist or whatever they want to call her, because she's smart, But sometimes, we just don't stick the landing sometimes. I watched Chris Rock last night work on his new set, and some of the jokes, were great, and some didn't hit the mark, and he knew it. After we had a conversation afterwards. But that's what we do as comedians. We practice until we stick the landing. When you're on live TV, you gotta have that worked out and stick the landing. These comedy shows that we do during the week at these comedy clubs, we're working on sticking the landing right. That's why, Dave Chappelle and Kevin Hart and Chris Rock don't want you recording their shows doing the show. I don't want you recording my show because this is a joke I'm working on. It's not ready yet. If you put it out there on the internet before it's ready, it's gonna have me looking some type of way. It may not be even funny yet. So that's why we don't like when people come and film our sets and put it on the internet. And a lot of times, if you put a joke on the internet, or somebody else does, and that joke is part of your special, Amazon and those other comedy special networks will not take that joke because it's been seen 1 million or 2 times. So now you got to take that set out of your stuff. So to get back to your question, we just have to be a little bit smarter and make sure we stick the landing. If we're going to be bold like that, be edgy like that, then yes, we do have to adapt. You don't have to stop saying what you're saying, but make sure you got your facts straight and you stick that landing.
Hey, Harrison Martin with Flicks for All, got to Winston-Salem. First off, big fan, a very big fan. But one thing I like about the docuseries was how it gave a lot of information on how a lot of comedians got their start. And I remember you talking about basically that the comedians, so-and-so did a set last night. He has a pilot. So-and-so did a set. He has an audition for a movie role, et cetera, et cetera. So how is it looking back and seeing how you and a lot of your colleagues, in my opinion, have made it, even starting, yourself had small roles on Martin, Don't Be a Menace, to one of the greatest movies of all time, I think, in American History X. How does it feel looking back to say, man, we did a lot starting from this? So,
man, there's so many origin stories that were in this documentary that we had to cut because of time and staying on task, that we're talking about doing something so those stories aren't lost. I mean, Flame Monroe, Lunell, JB Smoove, they had such great origin stories that we were like, oh, it's so good, but it's too long, and does it really fit? And so many great origin stories. But looking back on, the roles that a lot of us secured, not even just roles, but jobs, as far as, me hosting the Kings of Comedy tour, getting an agent or manager for some comedians, hooking up with a director. John Singleton was frequently there, and F. Gary Gray was always there, and Quentin Tarantino was always there trying to get at some more. But looking back, it's like, wow, this is why this room was created. This is why God gave me this assignment. And I'm just glad that I was obedient enough, not knowing I was being obedient enough to do it, but God planted that seed for a reason. And this was the reason. And prayerfully, people look at this documentary, if you're in a position to help others, I pray that you do. I pray that you pay it forward and ask nothing in return, but, for them to pay it forward to someone else. And I pray that, it inspires us, especially Black people, to, don't wait. My father used to always say, growing up, be proactive, have initiative. He always say, don't wait to be asked to do something. If you see something need done, go ahead and do it. If a hanger is on the floor, and it ain't supposed to be there, even though you didn't put it there, Don't walk over it, put it where it's supposed to go. I never knew that those things would mean so much later with Fat Tuesdays. There was a void. Something needed to be done. And I miss my pops.
Take your time. Take your time.
But that's why. I miss my dad. I'm sorry.
That's fine. Thank you.
I don't cry a lot, y'all. Trust me, I don't. Some
First
things are
of all,
personal.
I think one of the dope thing about your about the documentary is your showcasing of women during that time for comedy. What was it? What was your concerted effort to make sure at least one female was on your show lineup every time on Fat Tuesdays?
Well, to be quite honest, that came from my brother Joe. Joe was, already in the game before I was, and he said, just make sure you have at least one woman on every show. We would like to have more, but at that time there were so few women doing comedy, and so few women ready to do that stage, that we had to make sure we spread them out and have one. And it wasn't hard. Women are funny. Man, Yvette Wilson, rest in peace, was actually one of the first women to host the room. Melanie Hope was the first one to host the main room, Melanie Camacho. But Yvette Wilson, we were on the Def Comedy Jam tour together. And, when I couldn't do it, I trusted her. She was, one of my mentors as well. And it was just important because I used to hear a lot of the stories from female comedians about promoters and club owners, wanting to have sex for stage time. Or because the promoter felt like because they booked you on the road for a gig, he has the right to sleep with you. I mean, horror stories from female comedians who had to put the extra lock on the hotel door because the promoter would get an extra key, and after the show at 2, 3 in the morning, they're coming in the room. So you hear these stories like, wow. And a woman shouldn't have to, or other female comics who go on the road opening for male comedians, and the male comedian, hey, I'm just gonna get one room. Or trying to hit. You're not really helping their career. You just want to hit because you're away from your wife or your girlfriend, or you feel like she owes you something. And I didn't want to be that. I have sisters. I have a mom. And I wouldn't want anybody doing that to my sisters or my mom or my nieces. And, it's just we weren't raised that way. We just weren't raised that way. And it was very important, as you see, because they can do comedy without quid pro quo. And it's so many women in this world, no matter what ethnicity, that have to do that on their jobs. And that's that's a shame, especially when you're in male-dominated fields. It's got to be crazy. I have a lot of female friends who work for ESPN, so they're around sports all the time, and they get it from either male employees or athletes, and they're just there to do their job, not to sleep with you or whatever they're trying to do with you. It's just sad. And I didn't want to be, I've always been one to be independent. I always been one not to do what the crowd does. I never had a Jerry Curl. I never had a Michael Jackson jacket. I never had penny loafers. I never wanted to do what everybody else did. And when I was growing up, that was the thing. Jerry Curl, Michael Jackson jacket, loafers with the pennies in them. I just never wanted to do what the crowd did. And the crowd of male, not all, but male promoters or club bookers were trying to sleep with the female comedians or write together. Oh, let's write together. They really just trying to have sex. Like, it is what it is. Call it what it is. But don't be a part of the solution, not part of the problem. And that's what, my parents always raised us to be.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Dope documentary. And thank you for doing it for the culture.
Appreciate it.
Wow, this was absolutely incredible. Thank you so much, Guy, for gracing us with your presence today.
We done already?
We're done, sir.
Damn. Anybody have more questions? I have to go. Can we ask a few more questions? If that's okay?
Sure.
I just wanted to ask Guy real quick, because I told you I'm a New York comedian and I'm also a producer. I got to hear about the biggest bomb you ever saw at Fat Tuesdays. You don't have to say who the comic was, but I got to hear that.
I got two. I got one. Let me tell you one. One, I won't say his name, but I was doing a showcase for Def Comedy Jam, and it was right around the time that Muhammad Ali had lit the torch for the Olympics, and he had Parkinson's, and the comedian was on stage and he was killing, killing, and then he went to the joke saying how Muhammad Ali. Did you see? Because this was Tuesday. It happened that weekend prior, so it was fresh. And the comedian goes, "Man, did you see Muhammad Ali with the torch?" And he was shaking, and he was like, "Man, I thought it was gonna burn the whole stadium up." When I tell you the crowd shut down on his ass like the Batmobile, and because at the time, Hana Ali, Muhammad's daughter, was one of my hostesses, and she was in the room. And when he said that, I don't know if you've seen the movie Backdraft, but there's a scene in Backdraft when the flames started in the back of the room and they rushed through the front. That's the boo he got. He had a rolling boo. It started in the back of the room and rolled to the front, and they booed the hell out of him. I think that messed him up for the rest of his career mentally. I've never seen anyone get booed. Well, I have, I won't say their name, but that was probably one of the biggest bombs in Fat Tuesday history. Rodney Perry, I'll say his name only because he tells this story. He bombed so bad one time, and I know he was funny. He just had a bad set. And he came out with this corduroy jacket on with the patches on the sleeve. And this is 90s. And he went on stage, it just wasn't his night. And they booed the hell out of him. And I was like, yo, my man is funny. You got to give him another shot. Y'all wasn't booing him. Y'all was booing that Ben Vereen ass jacket he was wearing. So I said, man, I'm going to go back. I'm going to snatch the jacket off of him. I'm going to bring him back on stage. And I went backstage and said, man, take that ugly ass jacket off. And I reintroduced Rodney Perry, and he came out and killed. He killed for 3 minutes. He knew when to get up the hell off stage, but that was a bomb. And there was one more bomb that comes to mind. It was a Mexican comedian, because I let the Brown up too, because they had just as hard a time as we had getting on stage. And it was right when Princess Diana had died in a car accident. And he wasn't a known comedian, and certain comedians can get away with certain things. And he did a joke. People laugh at it now because he still tells the joke, but it was just a bad timing. It was too soon. I don't believe it too soon, but it was too soon. And he said her name was Lady Di. It should have been, B word, buckle up. And I guess he thought that joke would go over well in a Black audience because she was not Black. Black people like booed the hell out of him. Like, nah, that's just dark, too dark for us right now. So there are comedians who took risks, and that's what we do. We take risks, and we all don't stick the landing sometimes. And those are three of the ones that really stand out the most.
Thank you.
Guy, you say funny is funny. And in this thing, you say, I just went and got funny people. But it had to be more than that when we talk about LGBTQ, because you talking about back in the day when this was, people, they have a hard time today, and you went there. Talk more. Don't tell me funny is funny. Tell me what you were thinking about here.
What do you mean? I
don't the fact that you would even, that's a bold move. I think that you.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
No, funny is funny, man. If you're funny, it's a comedy club. It's not a this is what you do in your private time club. It's a comedy club. It's about jokes. And, Flame wasn't getting a lot of stage time, as was like a Gary Owen, who was white, and the Black club guys wasn't putting Gary Owen up. And I was just like, funny is funny. I don't what you do and what your sexual preference is or what your lifestyle is. As long as it's not illegal, doesn't matter to me. If you can make an audience laugh, that's what I run a comedy club. I wasn't running a judging contest or a fix your life contest, and that's not even about fixing your life. It's just like, if that's what you're into, that's what you're into. I don't care, just be funny.
Thanks so much, man. I appreciate that you did all that. So thank you so much.
Guy, just circling back to, because you said that there was a void before and you were just filling a void. And do you think that there's a void as well now for comedians to kind of showcase their talent and get those sitcoms and those other deals you were talking about? And what we gonna do with Fat Tuesdays next? I know you got something up your sleeve.
There's a lot of things that's going on with the brand. When I initially pitched the Fat Tuesday brand, the documentary, I had 4 other projects attached to it because I was told back then, because I was underground for the first 9 years with the project, just working on it here and there. I was on touring and doing radio and all that stuff. Pick it up, put it down, pick it up, put it down. It wasn't until 4 years ago I picked it up and finally took it to my agent's office. I showed them the sizzle, the presentation I had, and they were like, "You were sitting on this?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's just, And so it's been a journey. So they told me, people told me, not my agents and stuff, but they were just like, "Oh, documentaries don't make money. It's a passion project. I have a hard time selling it." But I saw the finish line. God showed me the finish line a long time ago. And I said, okay, well, I have to sweeten the pot then. I have to, whoever does the doc, these scripted and unscripted other pieces that are attached to it under the brand, then they get, they have first crack or first refusal at those. So that's what that is as far as like other stuff coming from that. But the first part of your question, I think I forgot the first part of your question.
Is there a void now? Do you think
void now? Is there a void? Meaning comedy clubs or what? No, not really.
Okay.
No, I think if there because of Fat Tuesdays, thank God, white comedy clubs have now added urban nights and have started paying more attention to urban nights. When I first started Fat Tuesdays, the other clubs were calling Fat Tuesdays N-word night and was laughing at the Comedy Store for doing it. Then they saw how much money it was making, and they saw the audience from their clubs on Tuesday nights flocking to the Comedy Store for Fat Tuesdays. Then they started their urban nights, like in the documentary. I think the Improv was first, it was called Freaky Mondays back then, and then went to Mo Better Mondays, and then the Laugh Factory started with Chocolate Sundays with Chris Spencer and Pookie Whittington, and then Kim Whitley and Buddy Lewis started a club in the Valley, which was a restaurant, and they just started doing comedy on a Wednesday night. Now that same place went from a Mexican restaurant ran by Armenians. Now it's a full-fledged comedy club called the Ha Ha Cafe. So, and then the Improv, because they're a chain, they saw how much money they were making on Monday nights in Hollywood at their Improv on their urban night. They started doing urban nights around the country in their other clubs. So no, there's not a void now. And comedians have an opportunity now to go, Black comedians have an opportunity to go in their city to a room, a mainstream room, and possibly get on stage. And if not, start one. Hope, prayerfully, they'll be inspired by this documentary and they go start their own urban room and give comedians a chance to be seen.
So Guy, we thank you for your time today. Have a great day. On behalf of the world's largest group of Black film critics, thank you for watching this edition of Africa Roundtables.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Absolutely, brother.
Thanks so much.
Sorry about your pops.